Hello, my name is Robin, and I'm a storyteller. And today I'm going to be telling you a story about a huge and terrible giant. Once upon a time, in a land far away, there was a great and prosperous kingdom. And the people who lived in this kingdom were generally very happy all year long. Well, all year long except for one day every year. On that day, the same day every year, the same hour of that day every year, a great and fearsome giant would appear outside the city. He would come down from the mountains where he lived, stand outside the city walls and shout,
"Swish, swash, bang, boom. I am your nightmare. I am your doom."
The giant never walked close to the city. He never tried to scale the walls or bash down the city gates. He would just stand in the fields outside, shouting and yelling, while the people inside the walls cowered in fear. All day and all night he would bellow and stamp, and then in the morning he'd be gone, only to return the exact same day the following year. Year in, year out this happened, until one day the people got so sick of feeling fearful of what might happen that they went to see the king and the queen and demanded that something be done. The king and queen reluctantly agreed. The next year, on the day of the giant's visit, the city gates opened wide, and out rode 3 knights. They were the bravest and strongest knights in the whole kingdom. They each wore polished steel armour that shone in the sunlight, and they each carried a sword by their side. The people of the city all crowded onto the city walls to watch the knights defeat the giant for once and for all. They watched as the giant approached across the fields. When the giant was about a mile from the city, he stopped and started to shout his familiar words.
"Swish, swash, bang, boom. I am your nightmare. I am your doom."
The 3 knights spurred their war horses forward and they charged straight at the giant. The people on the city walls all cheered and hollered. The 3 knights picked up their pace and drew their swords. The people cheered even louder. But then something unthinkable happened. As the knights were fast approaching the giant, it raised one of its mighty feet and stamp! And the 3 knights pulled on the reins of their horses and they came to a sliding halt. And they all sat there in their saddles, stationary, staring up at the giant with wide eyes. Their swords fell from their quivering hands and they began to shake in their suits of armour. Then the giant reached down one of his mighty hands, picked up a terrified knight and crushed him. The second he squashed with one stamp of his mighty foot, and the third he threw so high and so far into the air that poor knight may still not have come down to earth to this very day. The horses were all fine, by the way. No horses were harmed in the telling of this story. The people on the city wall all screamed and started to clamber down, but the giant didn't approach the city. It stayed out in the fields, about a mile away, shouting and taunting the inhabitants.
"Swish, swash, bang, boom. I am your nightmare. I am your doom."
In the morning, it was gone. The next year, more would-be heroes were found, and they too were sent out to meet their doom. Year in, year out, the giant would appear outside the city walls, hurling its insults, and each time a hero or heroine would be frozen to the spot, as if hypnotized, until the giant destroyed them. After several years of this, there were no heroes left. So the king himself rode out to vanquish the giant.
But when the king himself was only halfway towards the giant, he too was paralysed in place when the giant stamped.
Stamp!
And he could hardly lift a finger to defend himself when the giant reached down, plucked him easily off his horse, and swallowed him down in one gulp. However, in the city lived a young girl, and she wondered whether she might have what it takes to vanquish the giant for once and for all. So she went to visit the wise woman to see if she had any advice.
Ah,
Said the wise woman.
I do have some advice for you, and this is what I have to say. We are scared of what we do not know, and then it seems to grow and grow. And so it stands within our way until its name we learn to say.
The young girl thanked the wise woman for her advice. Peculiar though her words were, she thought she understood what they meant.
The day of the giant's visit came. The city gates opened, and the young girl stepped out. She wasn't wearing armour. She wasn't riding a horse or carrying a weapon of any kind. But she knew what she had to do.
The people on the city walls all watched in silence as the girl walked across the fields.
There was the giant in the distance, huge and threatening, an unstoppable force. It bellowed,
Swish, swash, bang, boom. I am your nightmare. I am your doom.
but still the girl got closer.
And as she did, she noticed that the giant didn't seem quite as imposing as it had a few minutes before. Closer and closer she walked. And the giant was enraged. It stamped and it bellowed. But the girl didn't stop. She walked closer and closer. And with every step towards the giant, it seemed to shrink in size. Soon she was closer than any human had ever been, ever. And the giant was no higher than a human man. Closer and closer she came until she was as close as she could be. She looked down. The giant was now no higher than her ankle. She reached down and picked up the giant in the palm of her hand. The giant looked up at her with wide eyes. "You have to say my name," said the giant. "Fear," replied the girl. And she closed her fist tightly around it.